Was it all influenced by the pandemic, which we read it during?
Well, I wrote it largely in 2017, so that's the easiest question. It was not influenced by the pandemic, at least not in its first draft. I had wanted to write about the time in my life, or the time in life, when I had just graduated from college. And I was feeling I was having one of those 23-year-old existential crises.
Pre-midlife crisis, pre-quarter century.
Quarter life crisis.
You had a 23. You had an
I'm advanced. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's just me or if other people have had these, but you graduate from college and you're like, well, now what? I've got a lot of debt. I don't have a job. I don't really have a job that I like right now. I don't know how to get a job. I don't know how the world works. I thought I did, but I don't. And it felt to me a little bit at times like the world was ending. So I mean, it's like the metaphor that led me to it. I did spend a lot of that time of my life working bad jobs. Jobs that at the bottom of the org chart, internships, temp jobs, and I had this idea. I mean, sometimes images just come to you. I had this idea of a young office worker who didn't really understand his job, kind of lost in a big office complex where nobody was. And eventually I came up with the idea of okay, what if there's an apocalypse outside? And basically, when that happened, it kind of clicked. It felt a little bit like Dawn of the Dead. If anybody's seen that, there's two movie versions of that, which is basically like zombies, but the survivors are trapped in an office, or not an office, in a mall. And this felt a little bit like that, but with an office instead. And that just seemed to snap together a bunch of the things that I wanted to talk about. Being young and disillusioned, trying to make your way in the working world, and also feeling like the world was ending, because in this case it literally was. And it also felt a little bit fun and funny to me, so that kind of sent me on my way. Is that close enough? Get us started?
There were other dystopian books that you sort of were inspired by or compare your own to, or if you're more cinematic here with Dawn of the Dead.
Well, Dawn of the Dead is certainly one that I thought about. There's an office novel, which I think Books and Bars maybe did way back when. Then We Came to the End. You called it.
Yeah.
That was one that I thought about. That's not dystopian, but it felt a little bit fantastical to me on some level, sort of absurdist. The way that that book portrays the office and office life feels very just otherworldly, or it brings out what about office life is very strange. And then, I basically called it, when I was pitching it to agents and editors, I think I called it Then We Came to the End meets Station 11. Or if people preferred TV and movies, I'd say The Office or Office Space meets Dawn of the Dead. The other one that sometimes came up, and I hesitate to bring this up because it's it's a complicated legacy. The TV show Lost. The Office is an island. They're trapped on an island, and it's an island full of mysteries. The reason I hesitate to bring it up is because I'm still sorely disappointed by Lost. So my hope was to do a version of Lost set in an office where things hung together maybe a little bit better than that show did.
And being that you were a former member and now you are an author side of us, can you talk about your publication story for the EXO project and then the Temps and how those two are different and how you got where you are?
This is quite a story, actually. So I got an agent for the EXO project, and he sold the book to my first publisher. That's the conventional way to do it. You write a book, you share it with agents, they pick you up, they sell you to a publisher, and then you do it again. You write another book and they sell you to another publisher or to the same publisher. I wrote this book and was really, really excited about it because, I mean, like you said in my bio, I like to kind of combine things, and this was a combination of like coming of age and office and science fiction. It really got a lot of the things that I wanted to be writing about, like in my own life, casting back to that point in my life. So I was really excited about it, and then I shared it with my agent. I was like, Andrew, I don't like this, and I'm not going to sell it. It's just another zombie novel. I was like, okay, well, let's talk. Because I didn't think that it was just another zombie novel. I mean, like, I just thought there was more to it than that. You know, like, what did you think of the millennial generational stuff? What did you think of the office stuff? He's like, I don't care about any of that. This is just a zombie novel. Basically, I think he was daring me to fire him, and I did. So I fired him, but at that point, I didn't have an agent. It's really hard to get a publishing deal without an agent. I did later get another agent with a completely different manuscript that I wrote after this one. And in the meantime, I submitted the Temps just kind of like on a lark to Keylight. They had open submissions for a very brief window. And 2.5 years later, I heard that they wanted to publish it. So that's how this came to be. And that's why this like seemingly pandemic novel was actually something that was written in 2017. And it took that long to make it to print. So yeah, I submitted that probably in May or June of 2018, and I heard that they wanted to publish it in January 2021. Most people here have read it, I think, so I'll just say, this isn't like a spoilery section, but it's from the middle. Jacob, who, you know, kind of starts out as my main character, he's paranoid, and he's going through the company records to kind of like put together sort of a conspiracy theory. And this is toward the end of that section. And he's talking to someone, he's trying to gather information from another coworker named Casey. And Casey says, so this is from page 161. Maybe, Casey said gently with the tone of an adult trying to calm a tantruming child, the more important question is, why is this so important to you? What are you looking for? The question irked Jacob, lodged in him like a pin bone in the back of his throat as he returned to the brain and kept digging deeper and deeper into Delphi's servers. What was he looking for? He'd found plenty already, enough to tell a compelling story about what the company had been up to before the gas. Hints of malevolence, perhaps even a conspiracy. So what was he waiting for? Brent had been asking him more and more if he'd found anything interesting yet, and there was no reason for Jacob not to give him everything he had. But something held him back. Not yet, he told Brent always. Give me a few more days. The problem, Jacob realized, was that he still hadn't found the one thing he was looking for, the thing he had been seeking out from the beginning, since the glass cloud rose up yellow into the sky, or earlier, even, the day he graduated from college and emerged into a world that wasn't all what he'd expected. Which was what, exactly? Proof of something, even if he didn't quite know what. Proof that they'd been lied to, perhaps, all of them, by everyone, beginning with every parent and teacher who told them that they were special, that they could do anything, that if they worked hard and followed their hearts, the world would give them everything they'd ever dreamed of. Proof that Tristan Brandt and Delphi had lied to them too, even if he didn't yet understand how or why. Proof that the older generation had completely messed up the world before handing it over to them. Proof that there was some meaning. Oh, the kids are gone. I could have said, fucked up the world. Anyway. I'll stop there. They told me I was special. And,
Well, look where you are.
yeah, look where I am.
You are special.
I've got the mic. It's amazing.
You're a jam retirement party, everybody. Give it up, Brent. Give it up.
By the way, congratulations to Jan. That's great.
Jan.
So, I mean, part of it was I had this whole thing, and still do maybe, a theory about some of the millennial generation, which is what I am. So, I mean, like, you know, people dump on millennials. I'm not going to do that. Like, I'm a millennial. But we, as a generation, we maybe I won't say the big we. I'll say I, and if this relates to you at all, we can apply it to the whole generation. But like, I grew up in a very, like a sort of break in history. I feel like, the Cold War was over, but 9/11 hadn't really happened. And there was this kind of, like during the Clinton era, which is when a lot of us kind of came of cultural consciousness, there was this feeling of like endless possibility. And, we were told we were special. But then, just as we were entering adulthood, I was a freshman in college at 9/11. There was 9/11, recession, like just a bunch of stuff happened. And kind of like, I think that that's something that makes the millennial experience, at least entering into adulthood, that we kind of grew up to expect that the world would open its arms to us. We could like do theater, and we could do art, and like we could major in English and like, follow your bliss, and the world will accept you. And it's just kind of not true. And you didn't tell me that like everything would be fine, but like I think just generationally, like that's something that I was thinking about. Obviously, more broadly, I was also thinking about something that we talk about a lot these days, which is ways that the sort of crises, the big cultural crises that are looming, and that millennials, Gen Xers, Gen Z are kind of inheriting, are the result of inaction by older generations. So like, it's kind of like things coming home to roost. I think we can even see that today. Like there's been so much inaction on gun control, and look at what we're inheriting. There's been so much inaction on climate change, and look at what we're inheriting. So to me, it's just, I don't know, I was trying to make a sort of generational statement. I think there's uniqueness to the millennial experience, but it's possible that almost every generation kind of feels this way. You enter into the world and you're like, oh, things are really messed up. Why didn't you do more to make things better, Dad? I'm sorry. But it's like and you probably had the same thing with your parents. So like, I don't know, this is just a repeating thing. So I definitely had that sort of generational critique in mind.
I believe that it is something that every generation does look to the one before them and sort of blame them for the situation they're in, and but then also thinks that they're the ones that have been given the tools to change it, and it will work out because they've been told that. People do jump on millennials. They don't jump on Gen X just because they don't remember us, Gen X. We're completely forgot. So any Gen Xers in the house, thanks for being here. Yeah, I see you. I remember you.
I mentioned you. Did I not?
You do. You do. But yeah, I think there is that sort of thing of, and we also hope that the generation after us will, be able to fix it, or we look to them as, the children are the future, as Whitney Houston once sang, and teach them well and let them lead the way. So I think everyone's always sort of trying to pass it to somebody else and not really taking it on. Unfortunately, they realize it's a really big job, and it can't all be done.
Well, and this connects a little bit to the end, which I imagine is something we're going to talk about, because like a lot of people have questions about the end. Can I say something about the end at this point?
Of course, there are spoilers here.
Because I was thinking a lot about this idea that like, oh, the kids are going to fix it. This is something that has been said about millennials. Like, oh, the millennials will just fix everything. We're like, a lot of us are in our 40s now. We're like in our late 30s and 40s. So we're the adults at this point. And in the end of this book, I think I was writing, I said that I was kind of projecting back into my experience as a 20-something. But as I reached the end of the book, I started to think about where I am now as an adult, and just thinking about the ways that like adulthood kind of comes for you. The systems that you hated come for you and make you complicit in them, and it's really hard. It becomes difficult to overthrow things. So one of the things that's happening at the end, I think, is me writing into that anxiety and really projecting a situation where these characters who have, at one point, have like very revolutionary ideas like we're going to change everything, they suddenly become engaged with like all the villains that they've been railing against this whole time. And in order to make change, they kind of have to become invested in the system that ended the world. So it's kind of what you're talking about. Like, everybody thought the millennials were going to change everything. Are we? Now we're kind of passing the buck to Gen Z and saying, the kids will take care of it. So this is another pattern that repeats in my view.
Yeah, the older you get, the more you become like your parents.
Right.
And the older you get, maybe the more, the more set in your ways, and you think, well, I'm too old to take this on right now. This isn't, I have things, I have a family, I have a house, I have a mortgage.
Yeah.
Yes, I have a 401k, I have to protect all of these things. Yeah, it's a tough situation. It's the circle of life here, the wheel, it just keeps turning. Can you talk about the structure, the way you wrote this with the alternating characters and narrative structure, and if there's anyone that you really identified with more or thought of as the voice of the book, or if it's a mix?
Well, so this is going to sound like a weird way to get into this question, but I got my master's in English literature from St. Thomas nearby, and I wrote my master's thesis on the history of Victorian detective fiction. Is this ringing any bells? Page 1. So like, I'm Jacob, y'all. So like, that's a little Easter egg for my friends, I guess. Most of whom haven't read that. Like, who would read my master's thesis? That's really boring. But like, I think when I was writing Jacob, I was writing the most annoying version of who I was in my 20s, because I was kind of annoying in my 20s. I heard my dad laugh just now. So like, I identify with Jacob, but I was kind of interrogating that version of myself. Like, I have tenderness for Jacob, but I'm also like, oh man, I can't believe the way I was when I was 24 or whatever, pick an age. In different ways, I identify with all of them. I think the one that I like the most is Lauren. But in different ways, they each contain different parts of me. I think that one of the things that I really wanted to do with the multiple characters was have different viewpoints on the company. Like, the ideas, they each have different ideas, like literally different perspectives on the way the world works, but they also each have different narrative information to bring about what the company is up to and kind of the mysteries. So like, the first Dominic section, like, he's the only one who knows anything about Tristan Brandt. He's the first one who can say anything about what the company does. So a lot of it was like different ways of introducing what's happening in the company and kind of hiding them just as backstory, because like, I introduced Concierge through Lauren's first section. I introduced Tristan Brandt through Dominic's section. And I really had this thing of like, I want there to be a mystery, and I want to reveal things slowly through different people's stories. So that was a big part of it. Also, my first book was multiple perspective as well, so it might just be the way that I like to write. Also, I think I started with Jacob, and I was like, I can't do a whole book of Jacob. Gotta get rid of this guy.
How he feels like he's a bit of a cultural elitist, and if you don't like what he likes. And it really reminded me of like early Nick Hornby writings in High Fidelity, where he talks about how when you're younger, you like people more for what they like versus what they are like, and so how like, oh, your friends are because you like the same music, you like the same movies, that sort of a thing, and how he was really particular about that. And then when he talks about the tenets of being a nerd on 102 was great too. Which then a few pages later we get your first law in a new world would be that everyone has to wear yoga pants. And I'm wondering, is anyone wearing yoga pants tonight? First of all, as a shout out to the book. And then what are some of your other laws that you would instill after your yoga pants rule?
Well, yoga pants or sweatpants or comfortable pants. I think maybe I anticipated the pandemic with that one because we spent a lot of time in comfy pants. I don't know if I have any other rules. You know, the interlude, they introduced a lot of rules. Like, you know, they just kind of hang out. I mean, if you want to know my, like, what would my ideal world be, it'd just be a lot of, like, people just hanging out together. Like, I think people spend too much time working and not enough time just hanging out with their friends and loved ones.
Like at a book club or
Like
a
at a
retirement
book
party.
club or at a retirement party, absolutely. So, I don't know, I haven't thought much about the rules of the new world, but the interlude section, someone did ask me about this, you know, because they're like, this book engages with some utopianist and dystopian, like, what's your utopia? I was like, I don't know. But the interlude, like, that, to me, they're making their own community, and they're just kind of having fun, and that's what I like.
Yeah, that was, refresh my mind, what's the time frame that they're basically living in that sort of, is it like 6.5 weeks or so? I feel like it was mentioned in the book that, so when they kind of settle into, you know, Swati's teaching yoga classes,
Yep.
right? And everyone's, you know, just kind of, they're hanging out, having parties, but then they, of course, find the people that are working the whole time because they think, you know, there's going to be a reward, which sort of leads to this idea of, you know, I got a theme of religion in this book and technology being like the new religion, and how everyone, you know, buys into this concierge app and how it relates to our society where we're all on our phones and stuff like that. And I was wondering if you can all speak to some of what you're saying, because I always felt that previously what I knew about you, that you were a bit of a religious person, and I'm wondering maybe what you're saying here.
Well, I am a religious person. I mean, the people working, like continuing to work, I just kind of wanted to do something weird. Like, I always had the idea, like, someone's gonna still be working because I like that. But then, like, I kind of, you know, then you start thinking about it, what does this mean? Like, we worked through the end of the world. We clung to our old ways of doing things. Like, you know, there were people during the early stages of the pandemic who were like, I just want to go to a bar. I just want to sit in a restaurant. I just want to shop. You know, like, these things that we use to order out our lives, it's quasi-religious because, you know, it's ritual, and they are things that we use to make meaning. One thing I saw today was someone saying that, like, they were talking about the secularization of the United States, and this person was saying, actually, the secularization of the United States never happened. Like, it's all religion. Yoga is religion. You know, like, fitness is religion. Work is religion. It's just all the stuff that people are using to order and make meaning out of their lives. And when everything falls apart, this is kind of, again, this gets back to the interlude. What new things are you going to do to continue to feel like your days are meaningful? And some people are just going to continue doing what they've always done. Some people are going to do yoga. Some people are going to get really paranoid and, like, dig into the company files. You know, so I'm a religious person. To me, that expresses itself in me wanting to think about how do people make meaning, and how do they make meaning when, like, all the usual ways of making meaning have been taken away from them. And we have just gone through like a 2+ year experiment in that, and it's been really weird. But yeah, I didn't write to that necessarily, but that's kind of my thinking, is just thinking about how people make meaning.
It really was a good test, and we might not have known it at the time that we were in it, but looking back, you know, it's like that old question of what would you do if money was an object? Well, it certainly was during the pandemic, but what did you shift your focus to in those couple of years, or even now? Like, what has that changed, and what are the things now that, and I feel like for a lot of people that has, hopefully they've seen what is most important to them, and that they're better able to focus on that now moving forward. I would love to open it up to you guys also. I have plenty more questions, but you're here, so who would like to ask a question? Question of Andrew first.
And I would just love to hear your take on that. Why, how, I was glad it didn't maintain that level of gruesome through the whole thing, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
You're a very violent guy, Andrew.
Super violent. I'm so violent. I don't know. I mean, like, I knew that it was going to start with this big set piece. It just kind of, like, you kind of follow your instincts. And I guess my instincts are pretty messed up. Like, I had a lot of people being like, oh my gosh, this is really shocking. And like, my mom, who's here, read it. My grandma read it. Like, you know, you don't think about these things when you write it. On some level, I wanted to express a particular experience of disillusionment within the systems and ways of being in the world that are available to us. And, you know, some people say that like writing and reading, it's about like a cure for loneliness. You know, like I felt this way. I felt a lot of the ways that the characters in this book feel. And I think I wanted to reach out into the world and say like, do you sometimes feel this way too? Like we just made a sort of connection. You know, that's not a point, it's just an expression of an experience, and maybe that experience really resonates with some people, and then we make some meaning out of that resonance. But if there is a point, I mean, like there's a few like propositional things that could be said out of this book. One is that like capitalism as we find it in the 21st century does not yield up like personal meaning or satisfaction to people's lives. Like there's a ton of sadness and loneliness in people who are working jobs that do not feel meaningful, and that's really hard. You know, like, I don't know, that's not hope for you. It's just like, it's really hard to exist in this world that we have somehow made together and previous generations have made. Another truth is that we live every day with fears of apocalypse. There's all kinds of apocalypses, big and small. The end of Roe is an apocalypse. The war in Ukraine is an apocalypse. The pandemic is an apocalypse. The other thing that I wanted to say in this book is that the apocalypse is not actually the end of the world. That like it keeps going, and that might be the thing that brings both nihilism and meaning, like both pessimism and hope. That like things are really messed up, but the apocalypse is not the end of the world. Like we keep evolving into new futures, and we do have the power to influence them on some level. Maybe there's your hope. Maybe.